This video is for teens, for young teens, maybe older teens, maybe not quite teen yet, but has a phone. And what I'm going to talk about today is when and how to get help in an emergency. The most important thing that you can learn, and the number one way that you can help somebody in an emergency, is to get the help of an adult as quick as you can, as soon as you think it's an emergency where help is needed. Now, the fastest way to get help is to call out to an adult who's close by, because they can help faster than anybody else. Mom, dad, grandma, grandpa. If there's not an adult who's close by, then you're going to need to call 911. And of course, 911 is for emergencies. So if you call 911 and you know that it's not an emergency, then you can get in trouble for that. And not only can you get in trouble for that, but you can be taking help away from people who need it. And we definitely don't want to do that. But what if you call 911 because you truly thought it was an emergency, but then it turns out not to be an emergency? Can you get in trouble for that? And the answer is no. And in fact, not only will you not get in trouble, but everybody will be really proud of you for playing it safe, because it's so much better to play it safe than it is to take a chance. Let me give you an example. One of my instructors was a police officer for a city in the Detroit, Michigan area, but now he's retired and he works as a deputy for a sheriff's department. And he was on vacation, and in the cabin next to him was a grandmother with her 11-year-old grandson. And grandson wasn't feeling well. Grandma was worried. So she calls up mom, goes, "Mom, I'm really worried about grandson." And mom says, "Don't call. I'm on my way home. When I get home, I'll take a look at him. We'll figure out what to do together." Well, unfortunately, when she got home, by the time she got home, her 11-year-old son had died. Now, obviously, if mom knew how serious that situation was, she would have wanted the call to be made. And obviously, if grandma knew how serious it was, she would have called. But look at the lesson in that tragedy. If grandma could go back in time and do it all over again, don't you think that she would? Yes. And if she did, there's that possibility that her grandson might still be alive today. And we can learn from that lesson. It's so much better to play it safe than it is to take a chance. And you'll never get in trouble for playing it safe. And exactly the opposite will happen. Everybody will be very proud of you for playing it safe. Now, what if you're in a situation where you don't know if it's an emergency or not? I don't know if I should call. Should you play it safe or should you take a chance? Well, of course, you should play it safe. You'll never get in trouble for playing it safe. Everybody will be very proud of you for playing it safe. And you're never going to regret playing it safe, where you could regret taking a chance. So we're going to call 911 anytime we think it could be an emergency where help is needed, unless there's an adult that we can call out to, because they can get there quicker than anybody else. When you call 911, the first most important thing out of your mouth is not what's wrong. It's where you are. People get scared and they start telling the operator what's wrong. But the problem is they can't help you until they can get to you. And they can't get to you until they know where you are. But can't they find me through my phone? No, not always. And not always as quickly or as accurately as you think. Not too long ago, I was training a police department, and I'm in the car with them, and they got a call. Somebody was having a heart attack, but never left the location. So all we had was a general, a couple blocks where the call was made from. And we're driving up and down the neighborhood looking for somebody having a heart attack. What do you think the probability is of that working? Well, unfortunately, we never did find the person. So the first most important thing out of our mouth is not what's wrong, it's where we are. When you tell them where you are, you've got to be specific enough that they can actually get to you. Don't just say you're in Kroger's, tell them which Kroger's you're in. But Kroger's is a big building, right? So don't just tell them which Kroger's you're at, tell them where you are in the building. We're by the dairy section. And of course, if you can send somebody to flag them down, that's even better still, right? Spending many years working for the medical examiner, when we go to scenes, the police are there already because they're the ones who call us. And even with the police there, it can be hard sometimes to find where the scene is. Well, how much harder is it for the very first people showing up? So if you can send somebody to flag them down and take them right to where the emergency is, that'll help them help a lot faster. Now, when you call 911, of course, you're calling for the police, you're calling for the ambulance or the fire department, and they'll send the appropriate people based on the emergency. Remember, when you call, the very first most important thing out of your mouth is not what's wrong, it's where you are. Don't tell them what's wrong until after they understand where you are. And you got to be specific enough that they can get you actually where you are, not just a building, but if it's a big building, where are you in that building? And if you can send somebody to flag them down, take them right to the emergency, that's better still. But what about a situation where you can't talk? Maybe you're by yourself and you're choking, or God forbid you're being kidnapped and you got to be tired or quiet. Or maybe you can talk, but you can't tell them where you are because you're lost. Call anyways, because a lot of times it can still help. But the only sure way for them to know where you are, and the fastest way for them to know where you are, is to tell them where you are. Once they understand where you are, then you're going to give them a brief description of what's wrong. You don't have to think of every little thing to say. Again, people get really scared. And think about it. That might be the very first 911 call you ever make, might be one of the few 911 calls you ever make, but the person you're talking to on the phone, they're on 911 calls all the time, right? It's their job. So they know how to help you. All you have to do is give them a brief description of what's wrong, then don't hang up, stay on the phone to answer their questions and follow their instructions. How simple is that? So remember, the key here is we're going to call 911 as soon as we suspect it's an emergency where help is needed, unless there's an adult that we can call out to, because that adult can get there quicker and help faster than anybody else. If we call 911, the very first most important thing out of our mouth is where we are. Only after they know where we are do we give them a brief description of what's wrong. Then we don't hang up. We stay on the phone to answer their questions and follow the instructions. Now let's talk about a couple other things here. First of all, let's talk about why it's so important that we get help as quick as we can, and why it's so important that if we call 911, the first most important thing out of our mouth is where we are. Let's say somebody's not breathing. Well, brain damage is possible in only 4 minutes. The goal of the fire department is to get there in 4 minutes. Now that's their goal. Do you think they always do that? No. What that means is if you're in an emergency where somebody's not breathing, best case scenario, and anything less than best is worse, is a zero margin for error for when brain damage is possible, if they're not breathing, and when the fire department wants to get there. A zero margin for error. This is why it's so critical that we get the help of an adult as quick as we can. Now, you might be in a situation where you have to choose between calling first or caring first. We never want to delay the call if we don't have to. And in fact, if you're in an emergency where you can't call out to an adult, but there's somebody else with you, and you can say, call 911, so you can provide care right away if you're trained to do so, then you want to tell someone else to call 911. But you might be in a situation where you're by yourself and you have to choose, do I call first or do I care first? Well, if you have to provide care to keep them alive long enough to make the call, then you're going to provide care first and call as soon as you can immediately after. So let's say that somebody's bleeding in their neck as an example, a lot of blood, right? That's scary. Well, if you say, hold on, I'm going to call 911. Well, by the time you get done with your call, they might be done too. So you've got to stop the bleeding first before you call 911. But if it's not a situation where you have to provide care to keep them alive long enough to make the call first and then provide care. If you have to provide care first, call as soon as you can immediately after. Remember, the most important thing that you're going to learn from this video, and the number one way that you can help somebody in an emergency, is to get the help of an adult as quickly as you can, as soon as you suspect that it's an emergency where help is needed. Stay safe.